this is a very serious problem. PSYOPs comes home, right? Psychological operations comes home. You have the U.S. government spending something like $250 million through 20 federal agencies producing news, producing propaganda. You have some people who were reporters, like Karen Ryan, who worked at PBS and ABC, who's now working for the government, creating these supposedly they look like news pieces, but they're propaganda for the government. And you have PR professionals who actually use false names who are narrating these pieces. Again, made by the government, distributed throughout the United States. Now, there is a reason why Voice of America is not allowed to be heard in this country. It's considered propaganda, and it is broadcast abroad. You could ask questions about, why there should be propaganda either there or here. But we do have a law in this country that says it can't be broadcast here at home. And yet the government, there is an explosion of these pieces using your taxpayer money that goes to newsrooms around this country. The Times did do an interesting piece, the New York Times, on this, an expose, the first time that the corporate media has really taken on in a very big way the use of the VNRs. And they found that even in interviewing news directors at local newsrooms saying, are you using these? And they would say no. That when you actually went through the records, they were using them. Either using them completely as they were put out, or taking these so-called reporters out, but taking their scripts and having their own local reporters narrate these scripts. And it's straight up propaganda. But what I thought was most interesting about it is that the reason it hasn't been talked about or uncovered for so long is it sounds like the rest of the newscasts. And that's what's so unfortunate. And that's what has to be challenged. But I also want to go back in time. We know about weapons of mass destruction now, because if you think about all these pieces, for example, in the New York Times, that daily, weekly, monthly, alleged weapons of mass destruction. It wasn't just the Bush administration. If President Bush had a little megaphone in the steps of the White House and it said WMD, WMD, maybe some people would have believed him. But he had something much more powerful, and that was his megaphone was the U.S. media. It isn't because Americans are stupid that most people still believe that weapons of mass destruction were found in Iraq. It's that Americans are good media consumers. And in the front pages of the papers of record, as well as the networks, they continually heard this repeated. And so they came to believe it. That is what has to be challenged, the lack of questioning of official sources in this country that really makes the difference, makes it possible to build the consent for what we saw in Iraq. I really do think that if instead the media in this country showed for 1 week the images of war, like the Seattle Times did with that photograph of the flag-draped coffins. Also think about whether we have seen wounded soldiers coming home. There's a reason the Bush administration brings them home under cover of night, as well as invoke the executive order saying you can't film or videotape the flag-draped coffins coming home. But if we not only saw that, we saw suffering U.S. soldiers, if we saw dead Iraqi children, if we saw Iraqi women with their legs blown off from U.S. cluster bombs, if we saw these images in the way that people in the rest of the world see these images, if we saw for 1 week the true casualties of war. I don't like the whole reality TV craze, but I think we need a little reality TV when it comes to war. The true images of war, I really do think Americans are a compassionate people, and they would say that war is not an answer to conflict in the 21st century.